of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 attacks, the Taliban announced a 33-member cabinet this week. It has been widely criticized for its non-inclusivity, which has become a point of friction between Washington, D.C. and Kabul. But an unrelenting Taliban is going ahead with the choice of ministers. To top it all, there have been cases of brutality against journalists, women, and even minorities. How the world is going to deal with the Taliban from here on is going to be a test of our collective conscience and principles.
Worries, concerns, threats, but no action. This is how one can describe the global community's dealing of the Taliban. Most wanted designated terrorists hold top positions in the government, including the new Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani. The US has a $5 million bounty for him. He also remains on a United Nations terror list. An interim government has been formed, but where are the women? Where are the minorities? Where is an inclusive administration?
Afghanistan future depends on its people and at the same time depends on the international community. And it's people, because how they can get together to build a unity government. At the end of the day, Afghanistan is ours to many Afghans, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazaras, Baluch, Aymaq, Pashai, many other ethnic groups. So Taliban cannot rule by themselves. Inclusiveness and ethnic grievances needs to, inclusiveness to, get rid of ethnic grievances is the key in Afghanistan, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to rule. But I think social justice needs to happen.
What will the constitution of Afghanistan be? The government is very clear that Sharia laws will be followed, and while some promise women's representation, there are others who have relegated the better half of the country to baby-making machines.
A woman can't be a minister. It is like you put something on her neck that she can't carry. It is not necessary for a woman to be in the cabinet. They should give birth, and women protesters can't represent all women in Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, a war of sorts has started between Washington, D.C. and Kabul on the inclusion on Sirajuddin Haqqani in the cabinet. The Taliban objected to the recent statement issued by the United States expressing concern over the blacklisted status of many members of the Taliban's newly formed government.
No one in this administration, not the president, nor anyone on the national security team, would suggest that the Taliban are respected and valued members of the global community. They have not earned that in any way, and we have never assessed that. This is a caretaker cabinet that does include 4 former imprisoned Taliban fighters. We have not validated that. We have not conveyed we're going to recognize it.
The Taliban have called it a clear violation of the Doha Agreement. A statement by the Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid reads, Pentagon officials have remarked that some cabinet members of the Islamic Emirate or family members of the late Haqqani Sahib, may Allah be pleased with him, are on the US blacklists and still targets. The Islamic Emirate considers this position a clear violation of the Doha Agreement, which is neither in the interest of the United States nor Afghanistan. The new minister, who is part of the Haqqani network, had been accused of attacks on US forces in Afghanistan during the 20 years of war.
The Taliban named a new interim government. We're assessing the announcement, but despite professing that a new government would be inclusive, the announced list of names consists exclusively of individuals who are members of the Taliban or their close associates, and no women. We're also concerned by the affiliations and track records of some of those individuals. We understand the Taliban has presented this as a caretaker cabinet. We will judge it and them by its actions.
Actions or the lack of it. If the Taliban are accusing the US of faltering on the Doha deal, what about the latter's promises of inclusivity?
Disappointed at the international community. There is a humanitarian crisis in Panjshir and Andarab. Everyone's ignoring it. And no one's coming to our aid. All these international organizations, they're just ignoring it. So it's very clear that they're biased. And right now, we're disappointed because this isn't what we were expecting.
Meanwhile, the fight in Panjshir continues. Contrary to the reports that Ahmed Massoud, leader of the Panjshir resistance, had left the country, he is still in Afghanistan. But apart from the fight for freedom and democracy, the real challenge is the humanitarian crisis that the country is faced with, and help is hardly coming their way.
In the current environment, the UN role must be clear and build on our humanitarian imperative. There is an immediate and pressing need to deliver, on a huge scale, essential humanitarian aid in areas such as health, food security, non-food items, and sanitation.
While the future looks bleak to many, the visuals of people challenging gun-toting Taliban fighters in the streets of Afghanistan is a testimony to the fact that the Afghans still have a lot of fight left in them.
The Taliban have returned to Afghanistan, and all those who fought fiercely to ensure that the Taliban stay away from this beautiful land are now without hope. I'm being joined by Ambassador Masood Khalili, someone who was an advisor to Ahmad Shah Massoud, the Lion of Panjshir, the man who took on the Taliban and the Soviets. He also worked very closely with President Rabbani. And today, we will be speaking to him about what he thinks could be the future of his country. Ambassador Khalili, many thanks for joining us here on India Today. Beginning with the Taliban forming the government, what is your first reaction to the Taliban having returned?
Oh, thank you very much. It's so great to talk with you. And I was having long history with your country, from Delhi College, that I was a student, to Karorimal College, and being an ambassador to your country. Yes, Taliban have announced not all of their cabinet, but we are looking into that very carefully, that whether it is broad-based, inclusive, or not. By broad-based, we mean that all other people, all other ethnic groups should be included, not individuals to be selected by them and put them behind the table. Number one. Number two, we will see that what the common people, the masses of the people will react to that, whether they accept it or not, because unfortunately, Taliban has had a very, very dark past, and still they have it.
Ambassador Khalili, Panjshir was a valley that was never taken. What's your first reaction to the fact that it has fallen to the Taliban, and your own leader, Ahmad Shah Massoud's son today, had to cross over to Tajikistan to ensure that he, for now, is safe?
Well, Panjshir Valley, we did not believe that they can stand long, because the situation of Panjshir Valley is that you go there, you're trapped. And they thought that, okay, let them come. I think, I'm not sure about that. Come. And then we will watch you in the valley and we will deal with you. But always they said, especially son of Commander Massoud, a young son, said that let us talk peace. No peace is bad. No war is good. Let us go on with that. But what kind of peace, madam? Not at the expense of my freedom. Not at the expense what we gained in the last 2 years. What not at the expense of me going to school, to university, because I'm a woman, I'm a girl. I cannot go because you tell me to not go. This is why they were talking about peace. And still we talk, bring peace, security is okay, but security is not peace. Security is the beginning of peace. If you don't bring it, play with that, you destroy security also.
What is your advice to his son? Again, Commander Ahmed Massoud. What is your advice to him, to all those who are still fighting? Amrullah Saleh, the former vice president. What is your advice to them who still are continuing to put up a brave fight? Fahim Dashti, who was there when Ahmad Shah Massoud was assassinated today, is no more, having fought beside Ahmad Shah Massoud's son.
Well, my advice to him would be that be always with people. The one who does not have people has nothing. The one who has people has everything. Go to your history of India. A small, tiny, slim man called Gandhi stood. Millions behind him stood because he was with people. I want him to be trusted by people. Be honest. Stand bravely. And always say that I will do what my father brought in Afghanistan. And I will have the legacy of not money, but of heroism.
Russia, China, Brazil and South Africa joined India in sharing concerns regarding terrorism and the situation in Afghanistan that could pose serious threats to security and regional stability. India was chairing the 13th BRICS Summit on Thursday. China will be hosting the BRICS Summit next year. With focus on Afghanistan, there was consensus among the BRICS nations on the security front. The leaders called for refraining from violence and settling the situation by peaceful means in Afghanistan through an inclusive intra-Afghan dialogue so as to ensure stability, civil peace, law and order in the country.
All interested in Afghanistan's ceasing to be a threat to the neighbors, so that the Afghan territory would be a source of drug trafficking and terrorism. We are interested in stopping migration flows. We are for Afghans living in peace and dignity on their soil.
The New Delhi Declaration underscored the priority of fighting terrorism, including preventing attempts by terrorist organizations to use Afghan territory as terrorist sanctuary and to carry out attacks against other countries. The two P5 nations did not miss the opportunity to criticize the United States of America in the handling of the situation in Afghanistan. Putin took a jibe at the Western form of democracy that the US tried to impose on Afghanistan and failed.
Numerous occasions that a new spiral of crisis in Afghanistan stems directly from irresponsible attempts to impose alien values from the outside and intention to build so-called democratic structures using the patterns and methods of social and political engineering without taking into account either historic features and disregarding the traditions that other people have followed.
This year marks the 15th anniversary of BRICS cooperation. Over the past 15 years, our 5 countries have enhanced strategic communication and political trust in the spirit of openness, inclusiveness, and equality, respected each other's social system and development path, and explored a sound way for countries to interact with each other.
Leaders called for refraining from violence and settling the situation by peaceful means in Afghanistan through an inclusive intra-Afghan dialogue so as to ensure stability, civil peace, law and order in the country.
Welcome back to World Today. Now, Russia and Belarus have been working together for long. While European countries and the United States of America have been trying to call out Russia on data theft, the latter has been trying to work very hard to create a formidable bloc against US and her NATO allies. This comes at a time when Russian President Vladimir Putin has been trying to contain dissent within his own country, like Lukashenko in Belarus.
Russia's Baltic Fleet joined the Russian-Belarusian military exercise in the opening ceremony of the Zapad 2021 at the Kaliningrad region in Russia. It will involve some 2 lakh servicemen, 80 aircraft and helicopters and 15 vessels from both countries. This joint military exercise continues while in Moscow, the leaders of the two countries met for the 4th time this year alone. After the 4-hour-long meeting, the premiers of the two countries announced approval to 28 strengthening integration programs.
The total amount of loans from September of this year to the end of 2022 will be $630 million approximately. 640 maybe. Well, somewhere over $600 million.
They were able to form a common energy and financial market.
After long discussions, we managed to find a mutually acceptable approach to the gas issue. The gas price for 2022 will stay on the level of this year. The document on establishment of a single gas market within the Union State will be signed before December 1st, 2023.
The integration measures would give Russia a strengthened position to act as a buffer with NATO members. The programs fall under a 1999 Union agreement that calls for close political, economic and military ties but stops short of a full merger.
Don't rattle with old phrases and words. That we are trying to take someone over or to unite despite the will of our people. When we decided, we found 28 directions and put them into practice in 3 years. Perhaps 3 years is too long, but it is a second in history. So don't worry about it. We will do anything in the interest of our people. And if we need a closer military, political or any other direction, economic integration, we will do it immediately as soon as we feel the demands of our people in Belarus and Russia.
Though the leaders stressed the interest of their respective countries' people, protests continued both in Russia and Belarus. Police in Moscow detained 3 journalists who picketed Russia's Justice Ministry, protesting against the authorities' recent crackdown on independent media. A top human rights lawyer who defended jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's team had to flee Russia. He accused the authorities of mounting a campaign to purge the political landscape of people they see as undesirable.
Из-за которого у меня начались проблемы.
I often receive this question about the only thing that led to the beginning of my problems. But the problems began not because of the Navalny case, they began a long time ago. I'm involved in a number of cases where the almighty Federal Security Service is our opponent. And at a certain stage, they probably decided to eliminate the undesirable lawyer, who has already become notable and caused a lot of inconvenience to the Federal Security Service.
Доставляет кучу неудобств.
The 50-year-old defense lawyer was one of an array of people to flee during a crackdown on supporters of Navalny, the fierce critic of President Vladimir Putin, and on media outlets. Kremlin labeled them as hostile and foreign-backed ahead of September Russia Duma elections. Navalny is not the only opposition leader targeted and jailed in Russia, barring him from taking part in the elections. 65-year-old veteran opposition politician Boris Vishensky was gearing up to run in elections this month when he learned that 2 of his opponents would not only have the same name and surname as his, but even the same facial hair in their official portraits.
I
laughed at first because those 2 clones have changed their names and surnames for names like my own in July.
Though the Russian Central Election Commission condemned the practice, but on the same breath announced that they would still be able to take part in the vote because of the wording of the law.
I understand that the law is soft and it allowed this manipulation, unfortunately. They acted shrewdly too. They did their homework too.
Belarus too continues to prosecute its opposition. A court in Belarus sentenced 2 leading opposition activists to lengthy prison terms. The relentless crackdown by the Belarusian authorities on dissent since elections from 2020 has led to more than a year-long anti-government protest in the country.
And here's World at a Glance for you with all the stories from across the world.
Cuba has become the first country in the world to vaccinate children as young as 2 against COVID-19. The communist island nation of more than 1.1 crore is using homegrown jabs not yet recognized by the WHO. Cuba kicked off its inoculation campaign for children on 6 September after completing clinical trials on minors with homegrown Abdala and Soberana vaccines. Hong Kong police charged the group that organizes the city's annual candlelight vigil, marking the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown, and 3 of its leaders with subversion under the national security law. 2 of them are already serving jail terms for their roles in unauthorized protests in 2019. The 3rd leader, along with 4 others, were arrested this week. They have been charged with failing to comply with the requirement to provide information for a national security investigation. Myanmar's underground body coordinating resistance to the military regime, known as the National Unity Government, called for a nationwide uprising. The shadow government's acting president's speech was posted on Facebook. Worried residents in Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon, started to stock up on food and supplies. Myanmar's military seized power in February from the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. The country has been racked by unrest ever since, with the low-level insurrection in many urban areas.
That's all in this edition of World Today, but before I go, I'll leave you with visuals of people paying respects to those who fell victim to the dastardly 9/11 attacks. It's been 20 years and people have come together to pay homage and respect. 20 years hence, we see the Taliban returning to Kabul and to Afghanistan.